The Art of Leadership Network.
Well, hey, leaders, welcome to the Lead Culture Podcast. We're a part of the Art of Leadership Network. I'm your host, Jenni CEO of the Foresight Group, a company dedicated to helping leaders develop thriving teams. Each week, I'll be your guide as we explore practical strategies to equip you with the tools you need to lead with clarity, confidence, and build unstoppable momentum in your organization. My mission is to be your trusted coach, empowering you to master the art of self-leadership so you'll learn to lead yourself well so you can lead others better. Each week, we take a deep dive on a leadership or a culture topic. You'll hear stories from amazing guests and leaders like you who are committed to leading well. So let's dive in and keep learning on this leadership journey together. Friends, one of the great misunderstandings about organizational culture is that senior leaders are responsible for culture. And of course, senior leaders certainly have disproportionate influence on the culture. But what the best organizations understand is that every person on the team contributes to the culture. So today I've asked Trina Lee, she's the U.S. Director of Program Alignment at Africa New Life Ministries, to join me for a discussion about how to lead culture from the middle. Now, I had the privilege of working with Africa New Life for several years, and Trina demonstrated one of the behaviors that culture champions understand. She took ownership for what she could, and I'm excited for you guys to hear from her today. So Trina, welcome to the podcast. I know you're a regular listener, so it's so fun to actually have you on the show. Would you introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit about you? And in fact, you now sit on the executive team, but we're going to talk a bit about when you were in a previous seat in the organization and just how you helped influence culture. So introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your world.
Yeah, thank you, Jenni. It's definitely a privilege to be on the podcast. I've listened to all of your episodes. So
I was going to say, you're a longtime listener. I love it so much.
Yeah, longtime listener. Yeah, so my name is Trina Lee, and I'm the sixth generation Oregonian, and I've spent most of my career in the nonprofit and ministry spaces. I actually work for two nonprofits. For nearly 12 years, I've worked quarter time managing the Forward Mentor Program for Christian professional women. And I've matched over 950 mentee-mentor pairs together. It's just been a privilege to come alongside those women. But as you also said, my full-time position is with Africa New Life Ministries, which was founded by Rwandans and is led by Rwandans in East Africa. And I've been with the ministry for nearly 10 years. And over the last 3 years, I've been in the executive leadership role. But I came in as the sponsorship manager to lead that team. My job involves keeping alignment with our Rwandan colleagues around programmatic things and strategy, but then also in the U.S. side, I'm helping our team stay in alignment, our department stay in alignment, and also working to stay in alignment between our two tiers of leadership.
Yeah, you guys have such an interesting dynamic because all of the work in ministry is happening over in Rwanda. And then you've got the U.S. team here. And so even talking culture, it's like, well, culture at an even broader level of the two different teams working together across the world, literally. And then, like you said, the alignment between the various divisions within the U.S. Part of the organization. So rewind for us a couple of years and tell us a bit about the culture at Africa New Life. What was working? What wasn't? Like, what were you noticing? I'm thinking, when I first started working with you all a handful of years ago, it was just post-COVID. I think it was 2020 that I started working with you guys originally, right? So crazy time to jump in, which created upheaval for a lot of organizations. But just give us context of some of just what the dynamics were like, what the team was like in that season.
Yeah, so I joined the team in December of 2015. And so the ministry was about 13 years old. And a colleague would describe it then as it was 13 years old and it was like a teenager who maybe recently had gone through a growth spurt.
That's perfect.
the limbs were a little longer and some things were a little awkward. But there was great success happening. And I think at the time, I didn't observe that there was any culture champions in the organization. So we had about 15 people in the US team. 2 were remote, and the rest of us were in Portland office. And I remember when I started out kind of finding myself asking the question, who is the owner of various things? A simple thing was, who is the owner of taking the mail to the post office, on a daily basis? And
Right.
one of my colleagues was like, well, we all just kind of pitch in. And I remember thinking, this is causing me stress that I do not know who owns what, to just trust that it's going to get done. And so I think that another observation I had at the time was that the leadership team culture wasn't top of their mind, and that maybe they hadn't had past experiences in other organizations where culture was emphasized. So therefore, maybe there was like a lack of imagination about what could be.
Sure.
And as you said, I've spent years listening to leadership podcasts. Shout out to Brad Lomenick and Ken Coleman, who were the first people who I listened to interview leaders on the Catalyst Leader. And so I think I've always thought about leadership a lot. But stepping into this role as the manager of the U.S. sponsorship team was the first time I was actually having direct reports that reported to me.
Yeah.
And so it was an opportunity to start to build a team and then to start to kind of live out some leadership ideas that either I had learned from other past leaders or just things that I wanted to make true. I think one thing that I did was just really tried to build the team that I wanted to be on. And
that's a great way to say it. Yeah.
And just went about kind of adding things over time.
Yeah. One of the things you said there, build the team you want to be on is brilliant, right? That's like, okay, like if we all just work from that framework, that would shift a lot of things and a lot of cultures. But I like how you identified, when you came in, you're like, wait, who takes the mail? Like such a seemingly simple thing. And again, when teams are small, I was talking to a leader about this yesterday, that when teams are small, it's like, oh yeah, this, not that. Who does this? Oh, well, we all kind of figure it out. And that's okay when it's a handful of people. But as soon as, the organization is growing and that lack of clarity, and you've heard me say this a million times, as have the listeners, right? Like clarity is a chief indicator of the health of a culture. And so the simple things that lack clarity begin to create frustrations in the organization and actually become culture eroders. So they feel simple, but a lot of times it's the very simple things that, if they're lacking clarity, begin to become a challenge for cultures. I think you almost hit on this, or you kind of hit on it indirectly, but have you always valued culture, or was there a point where you realized the need for leaders to invest in it? Like when was your aha moment around the importance of culture?
I think I've always been interested in leadership from a very young age. I don't think I had vocabulary around culture until maybe like the last 10 or 12 years. So I think that just that vocabulary of what is culture. In my late 20s, I was on the leadership team of a singles ministry at my church. And I did see in that season a drastic change in the community by having more intentionality. And so there were just odd dynamics in that group when I joined it. Men did not talk to women. It was a very strange dynamic. And I was like, this wasn't my college experience. And so it literally started with me making a directory of everyone's contact information. And then I was intentional about the questions I asked people and started to build relationships that way. And the community drastically changed in a fairly short amount of time. And so I think I would have then called that community building. And I now realize that was really culture making. That was happening.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Like sometimes we just experience it or don't experience it. And then we have like just intuition around it, in another environment. It's like, oh, wait, that back there, I want more of that, or I don't want more of that, whatever the case might be. Tell us about what you did with your team to build culture. So you said, you wanted to build the team you wanted to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us what you started doing. I'm guessing, was this pretty intuitive? Did you just start doing things that you thought would be helpful? Did you have any frameworks? What was guiding you? Your gut?
Yeah, gut.
Which is, serves leaders well. So I'm not arguing with that.
I think it was probably a combination of two things. I think it was a combination or three: gut, and then what did I like about what other people did, and then what did I not like about what other people did, which I think sometimes is a great motivator. Yeah. You asked me another defining moment. So I joined African New Life. There was one other team member on my team, but she didn't report to me. And then within the first month, we hired another team member who was my direct report. And so about 2 years before that, I had a kind of a defining culture moment when I was transitioning between jobs, and I was hired to be an instructional assistant at the elementary school that I had gone to. And I was only going to be doing this job as a very transitional job. It was 2 months. But when I showed up for the first day of work, at my desk was a welcome card from the principal and the entire office staff with some additional small gifts. And I remember being just blown away by what it looked like to onboard and welcome someone, even when they were going to be there for just 2 months.
Wow.
And so I think that inspiration was what I took into what does it look like for us to welcome and onboard a new team member. And so that evolved over time, but it involved having a welcome sign and having a small gift. It involved taking them out to lunch the first day and being very intentional about asking them questions about themselves, but then also making each of us answer the same question as well, so that we weren't just put on the spot. And then it also looked like coming up with these rhythms in meetings that we had. And so one rhythm was to we felt like there's maybe a perception that there wasn't efficiency within our organization. So my colleague Leslie said, well, we just need to start talking about it because we're doing it. So we literally had an agenda item that was called Efficiency Fund. And so we were sharing what we were learning to become more efficient.
I love that.
I also wanted to make space for people to share what they were learning leadership wise. So it was leadership learnings was a monthly topic. And then as we developed and had more clarity, our core values got revamped. And so then I came up with the idea of, this idea, and probably by that point I was hearing your podcast, or just how do you reinforce core values? And so I came up with a prompt that said, I spy was what was on the agenda. So it was I spy the core value of working as a team when Julie gave me feedback. And so once a month we were going through that and calling out the ways that we'd seen each other live out our core values. Another rhythm was when I first started, my very first week at African New Life, my birthday fell on that Friday. And my predecessor had trained me for 4 days, but then she had moved on that 5th day. And it was my birthday, and no one knew it was my birthday. And I remember going to lunch by myself, or taking myself out to lunch and just feeling I don't feel known, and I don't feel
sure.
And I knew that in theory, one person should have known my birthday who saw my HR paperwork, but just not feeling known. And so something that happened in a couple months later, going back to who was the owner. So we had a Monday weekly meeting, and it was very unclear who was facilitating that meeting. And so there were 3 managers at the time, and we were discussing kind of changes that we wanted to see made. And so we were trying to strategize, and one strategy is do we help facilitate some of these meetings that don't seem to have a facilitator? So my colleague Carrie volunteered to do the prayer meeting, and I volunteered to facilitate this weekly check-in that we had on Mondays. And there was a rhythm of recognizing people's birthdays, but then I got to be the birthday champion. So whenever someone's birthday came up, we would, as a whole staff, would verbally affirm what we valued about that person. And that's been a very consistent tradition since then.
I was going to say, I've experienced that sitting in some of the calls with you all. So I've seen that one in action for sure. That's cool.
And I think one tip I would like to share with all leaders is so a year later, it was my time for a birthday. And I think as leaders, we have to model not just giving, but receiving culture, which meant I needed to still tell everyone that it was my birthday and it was a time for them to affirm me. And as awkward as that feels, we can't excuse ourselves from those types of cultural things.
That's a good catch.
It's important for all of us to participate in those culture building activities. So along the ways of, I think, in any organization, we always have two ways we can always recognize people: their birthdays and their work anniversaries. And so then within my team, and it has now become a tradition when people leave the organization, I came up with the prompt, Africa New Life is better, and then you finish it. So Africa New Life is better because Kelly sees around corners and anticipates what's coming up next. And so we now do that. We do that within my team. We do that for everyone's work anniversary within our team meeting. But then organization-wide, it has become something that we do when people are transitioning from the organization.
Love that.
I could go on. There's a lot more things, but
there's so good. Well, part of what, and you gave everybody some great ideas and examples. And what I want to kind of call out is that you began doing this with the team that you led. Like, now you have a lot more influence over the broader organization, and it'll be fun to kind of get to that a little bit. But you were able to start doing that within your team. So you weren't leading out of alignment, because I think sometimes people are afraid, well, if I start doing things with my team, is it going to be out of alignment? Well, you don't have to be out of alignment. You can just start doing things within your team that are reinforcing and creating rhythms of culture. So those that are familiar with the lead culture framework, we talk about, you've got to build the rhythms that reinforce who you are at your best, the things that you want to be true about your organization. And so you need to genuinely have those rhythms, which you defined of like, in your meetings, you had the I Spy, where you're calling out values. You had the birthday celebrations, the work anniversary, and even the departures, which how we handle departures is so critical to culture building or busting. And so I just love that as you were talking, I was like, you can hear the rhythms. There are patterns and things that you are doing consistently that reinforce and help remind people, this is who we are, this is how we work together to achieve our mission. And you're pouring into people and reinforcing the values and things that are so key. Talk a little bit about, in that season where you're leading through your team, what were some of the differences with your team and the rest of the organization? Were you a bit of an outlier because you were focusing on culture within your team? What did that look like?
Yeah, I was an outlier. And I think, culture does exist. So it's not that culture doesn't exist in other spaces, but it is sometimes hard to see it when you're, not in those team meetings. And then as our dynamic has drastically changed to African New Life, we now have the majority of our team is not in the Portland office. So I always did have the privilege, though, of seeing my team face to face a minimum of 2 days a week. And so there's definitely privileges that came with that.
Yeah, with that proximity. Yeah, for sure.
I think there were, I think one thing that at that season happened is I think there wasn't, the subculture I was building was not out of alignment with the core values of the organization. But I think sometimes the subculture could have been misunderstood. And so I think it would have been helpful back then if leadership could have communicated, subcultures are not bad. It's actually normal and expected. And I think it might have been helpful back then if we had done more work to define what were the minimum things that all people managers were going to do. And if you wanted, so that there would be consistency across the organization. And if you then wanted to do something extra or different or personalized or individualized for your team based on their needs and how they work together, then that would be celebrated and welcomed, versus it maybe being a perceived sense of everyone else should be doing what I was doing. And I think that that's kind of where maybe the tension was at times.
Sure. Well, and it does, I think you make a important distinction of there subcultures exist, especially the bigger organizations are, the more that's even true. And what we want to be sure, and you spoke to this, is that as leaders in the organization, the more clarity we can provide to our managers, our department leaders, for, hey, here's the things that we would love to see be consistent, the rhythms and things that we would love to see consistent from department to department. One of the things I was literally talking to another client about this earlier today is that in the lead culture framework, we talk about the equip phase, which is the fourth phase of the framework. That's all about, are we equipping our leaders at every level to reinforce our culture? Because if our leaders at, various levels of the organization don't really understand the why behind culture, or they aren't equipped with the expectations of what we want to see them doing within their respective teams, then you get very different interpretations of that. Some teams won't even do it at all. And I imagine there were probably, and I'm making an assumption here, Trina, but there were probably people who were jealous of your team because of the things your team was doing. And that might have been where some of the riff occasionally was, well, why does her team get to do that? I hear that from some other organizations of, I'll have departments that are being really intentional with culture. And then other departments will be like, well, why do they get to do those things? And it's simply because one leader's focused on culture building behaviors, and one leader, it might not be on their radar, or they might not think they have permission to do it, or it's just not an expectation that they've been given. So really, it's just some interesting things there. Did you find that what you were doing with your team began to positively impact the rest of the organization?
I do think that there's ways that there's been like slow influence over time. So another department, so we had someone on our team who went to another department. And then she influenced some agenda items that are now on their monthly agenda. We had, at the time, I was leading the sponsorship team, and then was team trips within our department, and we had the same supervisor. And so I would have, our supervisor would join our sponsorship meeting, and then she'd then join the team trips meeting. And eventually the team trips manager said, can we just join your meeting, and then we can hear things at the same time? And then that just created an opportunity for a bigger team to exist, because they were a 2-person team. I've seen over time that, celebrating wins, which is one of our behaviors under our core values, that started to spread throughout the organization, and between the joint leadership meetings that we had with Rwanda before I was involved in those. And so, so things started to slowly spread over time. I think you've heard me say repeatedly this phrase, in the no amnesia, which is as a leader.
I've quoted you on that one. Yes.
That when you're a leader, you are in the know about something, but you have forgotten when you learned it, how you learned it, but most critically, you are forgotten who also does not know it. And so it is really fun when you hear other leaders start to use terms that you're using to try to give voice and vocabulary to a frustration that we have, which is, cascading communication. And I think when we're not in the know about something, we feel disconnected from the work that is being done. I observed it in lots of different ways, slowly over time.
Well, and I want to highlight that because I think, the impatience in many of us as leaders, wants those things to be caught quicker, and I'm sure that was probably true for you. But that, because you're seeing the positive impact and how it's helping your team stay connected and aligned, and, and then you wish for that throughout the organization. And, but I think one of the things I love about your story is that, from the seat that I was sitting in, coaching the exec team, I was seeing the influence trickle out, right? Like I would, and I wasn't there full time. I wasn't in it all the time, but I could hear the rumblings of the influence of what you were doing, to be strategic with culture with your team. And so I just want to share that with other leaders, even from a point of encouragement, because Trina, I hear from a lot of leaders, I feel like I'm the only one that cares about culture. And it's discouraging, right? Because we recently launched the Lead Culture Network, and the whole point being, I want to help culture champions connect with one another, because a lot of times you feel like you're the only one. You feel like you're the only one sitting in the seat who cares about it, and you feel like nobody else sees it. But I think it's also important to hear when you do it well, it does ripple out. Like that influence does ripple out. And so just helpful for, I think, leaders to hear that. Did you sometimes feel like you're the only one that cared about it? And how did you handle that?
I did. We did within the first year though of being at the organization, we did have someone else who came from a really healthy culture. And I want to, give Chrissy credit for all of the work that
Yeah,
she did to really um, influence where she was at. She was in a different position at the time. And she was able to really institute a lot of things culture wise that continue today.
that's
Um,
huge.
I think, yeah, it definitely didn't mean there weren't frustrations of like, why isn't this great thing that I've done being, adopted sooner? But yeah, I think yeah. So I was not alone. I think though there wasn't maybe strategicness of us maybe working to collaboratorily or together on things that might have moved some things faster as you talk
Faster.
about putting together, a team of people. I think that
Yep.
that is where you're going to have more longevity in the changes that you're wanting to make. I am really proud of the fact that things that have happened and I don't actually have ownership of them anymore that have transitioned to other people. It's great to see these things continue. Like literally some of these things have just become part of our culture. So, I'm not facilitating the Monday update meeting where birthdays are being formed, and Amanda is making sure that we've just continued in that and not missed that tradition. And then I don't facilitate the sponsorship team meetings anymore. That is Julie, and she's just taking the systems and rhythms that I established and taking them to another level.
Awesome.
And so that's just been fun to see as I've transitioned into a different role.
That's so good. I love that you called those out because you were intentional, you built rhythms, you built systems. Then when you transitioned into a new seat, the infrastructure was there for leaders to continue it. They didn't, and like you said, even make it better or improve upon it. Right. So,
yep.
And that's the power of, one of the convictions I have and what I'm trying so hard to help educate leaders around is that culture needs a system, just like every other key initiative in your business. You need a system for sustaining culture. And when you build those rhythms and those systems, then they outlast you, right? So then they truly do become a part of the culture and not just some episodic rah-rah event that we did one time that felt great, but then we didn't repeat it somewhere. How about leading up? So you're in that mid-level seat. What were you doing to help senior leaders understand the value of what you were doing?
I was trying to show or model what I was doing. So, and to, to show it and show the impact of it. One thing that I got from Andy Stanley's church is, that 90-day review of where you're having a new employee evaluate you.
Yep.
So totally found that online and repurposed it. And so, when I had team members fill that out, I was giving copies to my supervisor and our executive director. Like, these are the questions where I'm asking, here's the responses. So that was one way of trying to model up. I detailed everything in my annual review and also tied it back to the core values.
Good. Yeah.
And then there are different seasons as managers, we were involved in meetings with our executive leadership team. And there's one kind of defining meeting where the topic of feedback came up. I was very animated in the feedback I gave that we didn't at the time have a feedback culture. And so I think fought really hard for wanted to bring clarity around something that at the time was a blind spot. And I think that conversation did start to cause more reflection around that topic. And then things have significantly changed since then.
Yeah, that's huge. I remember some of that was a big topic of discussion and, just your, and I think this question I think is really valuable for so many leaders who will have been in seats that you were in or in seats that like you were in, where it's like you can see something that maybe is a blind spot for executive leadership and bringing it in such a way that, I love that you'd had those 90-day reviews with your new team members. So you had some data points, right? So it wasn't just like, Trina's gut and intuition, which is not wrong or bad, but sometimes when we're leading up and we're bringing things to executive team, got to bring some of the data or the, stories or the specifics that help just kind of surface it. And then and picking your battles a little bit. I think, like, if I'm putting words in your mouth, I think the feedback piece was really, really critical at that season for you guys as an organization. And if I recall right, and if I'm interpreting you right, I think you risked a little bit to kind of push on that one to say, hey, we really need to actually lean into this. Am I framing that fairly?
Yeah, and we even had feedback as one of the behaviors within our core values. And I can't remember exactly how it was worded, but I think it might have been worded like respectfully give feedback. And I had an opportunity to be in a meeting in Israel where we were revisiting our core values with our Rwandan colleagues. And that meeting happened after the other one where I said we don't have a feedback culture, but I was able to influence getting it to be reworded to that you ask for, give and receive feedback. Because I think that was what was important to me, was that as leaders, we have to actually ask for it.
Yeah. That's good.
We can't just expect it to come. And then we need to listen to it, actively listen to it.
Yeah, that's really good. So what does your influence look like now that you're on the exec team, especially when it comes to culture? What things are you doing organizationally to continue to invest in the health of the team? Fast forward to the seat you're in now and tell us what it looks like.
It's interesting because you've always said, right, that you always think culture is better from the top than what it really is. And I keep on trying, and it's so true. I mean, I know I had more clarity and had an advantage around culture when I was in the middle of the organization. I mean, I do think your middle leaders are actually see things more clearly than your senior leadership team does.
That's a great point, Trina.
Because you can see up and sideways and downward, and you really have a much more 360 view of what is happening culturally.
Yeah.
Where you sit in the organization. So I am painfully aware that I don't fully know what is happening culturally, and keep on, like, we'll remind our executive team that as well. Like, there's a limit of what we're going to know. Like, I can sense things, I can see things, and I can hear things, but I am not seeing the entire picture. So I think that I want to always be grounded in that and try to not be humble about that, that there is just a lack of knowledge I don't have based on where you sit in the organization now.
Yeah.
Some things, though, that I feel like I have, and in some ways, Jenni, as I was reflecting for this conversation, I realized that I thought more about culture when I was managing a team than I do now. And it's like, I need to start thinking about this more, because I think that, as you increase your responsibility, the weight of other things gets greater, or can get greater. But like the culture rock needs to be one of those first rocks that goes in the bucket. And
that's right.
Is never going to be enough time or energy if it's the last rock. Like you're going to run out. And so, so even preparing for this has been conviction of, like, what are the rocks that where do I even have a tool that I use with my team that I've actually not, I'm in the position where I can execute it organization wide. And I just haven't sent the email to someone to create a form stack. So to create this, I have the tool. I just haven't executed on it. The things that I feel like I have been able to champion is kind of around 3 areas: rest, feedback culture, and cascading communication. We now have 1 meeting-free day a week in our organization.
That's great.
To try to give some deep work. We also now close our office for the first week of July, and we call that synchronized rest.
Oh, I love that.
And so I think those are 2 cultural things as far as around the topic of rest. We've talked a lot about feedback culture. And so I have continued to advocate for feedback culture and to try to help us move forward. So I do facilitate the leadership meeting monthly. That's between our executive leadership team and our second tier of leadership, which are managers. And so have incorporated feedback questions into that, trying to give the managers, I think sometimes it can feel safer to possibly give feedback when you're all being asked to give feedback versus as a one-to-one basis.
Yep.
So try to give space for them to give feedback. I will also check in with the managers and saying, how do you feel like executive leaders showed up when we listened to the feedback? Were we actively listening? Do you felt heard when you did give feedback? And then last year I instituted us doing skip level meetings. So
Great.
Came up with a list of questions, shared those with all team members before we had meetings with them. And so every person in our organization had a one-on-one meeting with their supervisor,
Yeah, great.
where they got to answer those questions. And I think that was a huge deposit in building trust and for team members to get to see, what does it look like when I give feedback? Is it going to be safer to give more harder feedback in another conversation down the road?
So good.
And then cascading communication. I already talked about my term in the no amnesia. And that is an ongoing struggle. And I think the one thing about labeling it is then calling it out and taking ownership. Yeah, we missed it. We did not cascade that well. That was a case of in the no amnesia, and taking ownership.
Yep.
When things are not communicated clearly, and hoping to do better. Yeah.
So good. Gosh, Trina, that was so good. I love your awareness around, now that I'm in the exec team, how easy it is to get busy with all your other priorities and, the pressures and responsibilities. And even though you're a culture champion, fighting for that that's a deal. That's a real issue. And so I love that you called that out. And gosh, just some great stuff that you're doing and trying to continue to reinforce. And, this is one of those things, culture building is ongoing. It's not like we do it once and we arrive. It's a rhythm that we're continually improving upon and paying attention to what's actually working, what's not working, what was working, but is not as effective as it used to be. And so I just love to see what you're doing and your awareness around that. Okay, we have to wrap up, even though I could keep asking you questions for hours. What do you wish you would have known sooner in your career about the importance of culture? In other words, how would you coach our listeners to take ownership for the influence they have?
I wish I would have had the knowledge of culture and the vocabulary around it. And then to anyone, I would just say, and you've set this up for this whole interview, but it does not matter where you are in the organization. You actually do have responsibility to create healthy culture, and that there are so many things that you can do regardless of where you sit within an organization. And I think the encouragement I would give is lean into how you are wired. What does it look like for you to show up for your friends and your family? And then how can you take those same natural wirings and giftings and bring it to your workplace? So are you naturally someone who is a words of affirmation person? What would that look like for you to write a note of encouragement to your colleagues? Are you someone who's really good at GIFs? What does it look like to have a good GIF game and really know your colleagues and send them a GIF to just make them smile and laugh?
That's great.
What does it look like if you are a gift giver? Are you someone who would enjoy baking each of your team members their favorite cookie on their birthday? What does it look like? Are you someone who likes to plan things? Could you volunteer to help organize the Christmas party or to participate in that? Are you someone who just is really good at asking questions? I mean, I think so much culture building is simply done by us asking questions of our colleagues and getting to know them. You could formally do that by offering to help facilitate or to come up with those questions for a team meeting, but you literally can be doing that when you have lunch with people. You literally could be asking people to have a virtual coffee if you've got team members that are remote. There's so many things that you can do to build culture. And then any one of us can call out where we see our colleagues living out our core values.
That's right.
So regardless of where you're in the organization, there's so much you can do. And I think my encouragement to leaders too is I'm an all or nothing person. And, but I think when it comes to culture, as great as it is to have, the culture lead framework all figured out, don't let not having a framework prevent you from starting to do culture building.
That's right.
Just do, and you've said this before, you literally just have to do one thing at a time and then figure out how to not to, I mean, we've been saying rhythms and routines. It's how do I make it a habit? How do I somewhat put this on autopilot? Because when it is on autopilot, it doesn't take as much energy. When you always do this on the first meeting of the month, then that's just, it's rinse and repeat.
Right.
And then it allows you to have the freedom or the time and the energy to add something new or to work on other problems in your organization, but just keep building upon the things that you're doing. But don't wait for a perfect plan.
That's good.
Just identify one thing and take action.
Take action. I love that so much. A lot of times I'll tell leaders just simple and consistent, right?
Yes.
Find something you can do simple, consistently. And then like you just said, just keep building on it. Just keep building on it because you'll build it over time. So I love that, Trina. So good. Thanks for being such a great example and being willing to just share your story and insights of what you've learned and how you've done it. Because I think that's what so many of us need is we just need to see some examples. We need to see people who are just doing it to give us kind of the courage and confidence to just go after it. So before we wrap up, maybe tell us a little bit more about how to connect with African New Life or Forward. Like you're a part of so many great organizations. So pitch us so we can learn a little bit more about those organizations.
Yes. If you are a Christian woman and looking for mentorship, then go to forwardwomen.org. And that's similar to Foresight, the number 4, the word women.org. And specifically the mentor page is /mentor. And then if you're interested in what African New Life is doing in Rwanda and the transformation that we're seeing in that country, you can go to africanewlife.org. And we love it when people want to learn more about the ministry and even come visit us in Rwanda.
So good. So good. I still haven't done a Rwanda trip. How is that possible? Like, but you guys.
Jenni, anytime.
I know. I think I almost went on one of the trips a couple years ago and I forget what happened. But anyway, I can't believe that hasn't happened yet.
I will give you my dates in April.
I'm committed now. That's awesome. But friends, actually, both of those organizations, phenomenal organizations. And we'll put the links in the show notes and just would love for you to connect with them. I sponsor for African New Life and love just being a part of the organization on an ongoing basis in a very limited way, but really just meaningful to be a part of. So, all right, friends, are you a culture champion like Trina? Maybe you feel a little alone, like you're the only one who sees the importance of culture. If that's you, I want to make sure you know about our brand new resource, the Lead Culture Network. The network is a space designed for leaders like you who care deeply about building thriving, unstoppable teams. You'll find inside the network, you'll find the Lead Culture course library. We have a whole new course that we've built out around the Lead Culture framework. So you can walk yourself through the framework and guide a team through it, which is practical tools to help you really lead culture change with confidence. You'll also find our Leadership Institute course, which is a deep dive into leadership development. So even if you're interested in just like, I just need to keep growing as a leader, we have a whole library of resources baked into it just specifically to keep equipping you as a leader. I'm going to do monthly live trainings where I'm giving you timely strategies that you can apply both in leadership and culture, just the things I'm learning, the things I want to impart to you so we can keep learning together. We're going to do Q&A and hot seat calls. So if you want real-time feedback for your leadership challenges or your culture challenges, we're going to get on a live call and myself and our lead culture coaches are going to give you that feedback real time. So live coaching. And then there's a network of the culture champions, a community of leaders that are committed to culture work. So as a founding member, you get early access to all of these resources where the lead culture course is coming out week by week. So you're getting it as it releases. Because the full course won't be available to the public until 2026. So if you join now, you'll get in and you'll get access to all of those resources early. So whether you're a senior leader, a team leader, or even an individual contributor, you are influencing your culture, and the network will connect you with all of the content and the connections to begin building your culture plan. So friends, go check that out. The link's in the show notes. Founding member access is really inexpensive, $49 a month. That's less than $600 a year to take action on your culture. So check that out and join me in that, because it's proving to be just a phenomenal group of leaders. All right, friends, I hope you were inspired by this episode. Trina gave us so many practical things to take away, things that you can do tomorrow to influence your culture. So I hope you'll pick one thing you learned today and take action on it this week. And then give us some feedback. Let us know how you felt. Share this with a friend. Give us a rating or a review. And then we will see you next week.